Welcome to the Korea Research Channel.
We are so glad you're here with us today.
Yeah, and if you are joining us, please take a quick second to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a deep dive into the region.
It really helps us out, and, it keeps these deep dives coming.
Absolutely. So I want you to picture this. You have the leaders of the world's two absolute rival superpowers. We are talking about Donald Trump and Xi Jinping.
Right, the titans.
Exactly. And they are just days away from this monumental, highly choreographed summit in Beijing, a meeting that is basically going to shape the global order for years to come.
The stakes, they literally could not be higher.
No, they couldn't. The itineraries are locked, the diplomatic protocols are set, and the whole world is holding its breath. But then the real plot twist happens.
That is a fascinating one.
It really is, because it happens 2 days earlier, on May 13th, in a completely different country. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent doesn't just fly straight to Beijing to prep the ground.
Which is what you would expect, right?
Right. Instead, he touches down in Seoul, South Korea. And he isn't just there for a polite layover or to stretch his legs.
No, he is holding a preliminary meeting with China's economic czar, Vice Premier He Feng.
Which is just wild to think about. So right before the main event, the economic leads of the U.S. and China are sitting down together in a third country.
It is the kind of maneuver that forces every foreign policy analyst to do a massive double take.
It really is. So our mission today is to unpack the hidden calculations behind this highly unusual detour. Think about it like sports. Why play the most important pregame match of the decade in someone else's stadium?
That is the perfect way to look at it. You don't pick the stadium by accident, especially in high-stakes diplomacy.
Right. So what does this reveal about South Korea's radically shifting position on the global chessboard?
Well, what we are seeing is Washington weaponizing visibility. By physically arriving in Seoul, locking arms with a key Asian ally, and hosting the Chinese economic czar on that allied soil, the United States is sending this blaring, unspoken message.
Like a show of force before the actual negotiations.
Exactly. Before Trump and Xi even shake hands, Washington is demonstrating an ironclad tech and economic solidarity in Asia. It's a pressure tactic designed to put Beijing on the defensive from day one.
But wait, let me push back on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because Korea relies almost entirely on the U.S. security umbrella to protect it from North Korea, right?
Yes. Historically, that is the bedrock of the alliance.
So doesn't Washington hold the ultimate trump card anyway? Is this really a flex of mutual solidarity, or is the U.S. basically just dragging a dependent ally to the front lines to look tough?
That is the traditional way to look at it, and it's how a lot of geopolitical theory has historically treated Korea, as this buffer zone.
Just sort of navigating the turbulent waters between great powers.
Right, constantly trying to avoid being trampled. But this May 13th meeting, it really shatters that old view.
How so?
Because the dynamic is actually becoming a mutual hostage situation. The more intense the competition between the U.S. and China becomes, the more indispensable Korea becomes to both sides.
Oh, wow. So it's no longer just a dependent buffer state.
Not at all. It is a core player. And it all comes down to the tech.
We are talking about the advanced semiconductors and electric vehicle batteries, right?
Yes, and we really need to look at the actual mechanics of why that matters. It isn't just that Korea makes, generic consumer electronics.
Right, it's much deeper than that.
Yeah. Companies like Samsung and SK Hynix operate a near oligopoly on the world's high-bandwidth memory chips, the DRAM and NAND chips.
Which are in literally everything.
Exactly. You can design all the cutting-edge artificial intelligence systems you want in Silicon Valley, and Taiwan can manufacture the logic processors, but none of those AI servers function without the specialized memory chips that Korea completely dominates.
Okay, so Washington's grand strategy to build a global supply chain that contains China's technological rise is literally impossible without Seoul on board.
It just doesn't work. You can't freeze China out of the tech race if you don't have the people who actually make the cutting-edge memory chips locking the door with you.
That is a stark reality. And I imagine from Beijing's perspective, as the U.S. tightens those tech controls, China is getting desperate.
Oh, very. They're desperately seeking pathways to keep their economy modernized. They need access to Korean components to build their own EVs, smartphones, and servers.
So Korea's economic connectivity is just far too valuable for China to forfeit.
Exactly. They can't afford to lose it.
It is almost like being the only bank in town that both rival mob bosses use to launder their money.
That is a great way to put it.
You are incredibly valuable to both of them. It completely shifts the traditional view of what makes a country powerful. We usually measure power in aircraft carriers or military bases.
Right, the traditional hard power metrics.
But here, supply chain choke points and advanced manufacturing are being deployed as a literal negotiating weapon.
Yeah, that mob bank analogy captures the tension perfectly. By making this stop in Seoul, Washington is publicly acknowledging Korea's strategic leverage.
But holding the keys to the tech kingdom doesn't mean much if you don't actually, turn them in the ignition.
Exactly. Which brings us to how Seoul is actually weaponizing this dependency against Washington's domestic policies right now.
Right, because if I am sitting in Seoul and I realize the U.S. desperately needs my memory chips and my public support ahead of this massive Beijing summit, I am absolutely looking to cash in.
Oh, without a doubt. It is a very unique window of opportunity.
So how does Korea actually extract value from this?
They do it by targeting the very trade rules that usually hurt them. Historically, in bilateral economic talks, Korea has found itself in a relatively supplicant posture, basically just adapting to whatever massive domestic policies the U.S. rolls out.
Right, they just sort of had to take whatever Washington decided.
Yeah, take the Inflation Reduction Act, for instance.
The IRA, let's briefly break down the mechanics of that for anyone who isn't familiar. The IRA essentially cuts out Korean automakers from U.S. consumer tax credits unless they meet incredibly strict local assembly rules in North America, right?
Essentially, yes. It heavily favored domestic U.S. manufacturing, leaving massive Korean conglomerates like Hyundai and Kia at a severe disadvantage.
Which is a huge blow to their auto industry.
Massive. And normally, a mid-sized economy would just have to swallow that pill, maybe build new factories in Ohio or Georgia and just deal with it.
But things are different now.
Very different. Because Washington needs Seoul's unified front so badly right now, the dynamics have fundamentally shifted. Seoul can demand waivers.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they can press their corporate interests on the IRA, or they can demand preferential access to American semiconductor subsidies under the CHIPS Act.
So they can essentially force the U.S. to bend its own domestic trade rules in exchange for geopolitical loyalty.
Exactly.
Imagine the whiplash for Korean corporate executives. I mean, they go from practically begging for tariff relief to being able to say, hey, Washington, we are more than happy to host your Treasury Secretary and stand shoulder to shoulder with you against China.
But you need to fix these EV battery tariffs first.
Right. That is incredible leverage.
And that leverage, it extends to Beijing as well. Having Seoul serve as the venue for this U.S. China economic dialogue carries immense symbolic weight.
Because in diplomacy, the venue is the message.
It absolutely is. It signals to Beijing that Korea has the full weight of the American alliance behind it. They aren't just this isolated neighbor that China can push around.
So in future trade negotiations, Korea can speak with a much firmer voice.
Precisely. They have serious backing.
I would imagine that sends a massive signal to global investors, too. If you are a massive hedge fund or a multinational corporation looking to park billions of dollars in a very turbulent Indo-Pacific region, you see the U.S. and China both relying on Korea.
Right. It paints Seoul as the neutral Swiss bank of Asia, the ultimate safe harbor.
It broadcasts incredible resilience to the markets.
Yeah.
But, and I feel like this is where the mob bank analogy catches up to us, it would probably be a fatal mistake for Seoul to bask too long in the warmth of these opportunities.
Oh, absolutely. Being the bank for two rival bosses means that the moment you try to close an account, you become the first target.
Yeah, the invoice for this alliance is coming,
Mm-hmm.
and it sounds like it is steep.
It is very steep. We need to talk about the hidden risks here.
Let's get into the harsh reality of this arrangement. What does Washington's invoice actually look like?
Well, tighter alignment with the U.S. is a transaction. In return for treating Korea as a core partner and granting those IRA waivers, Washington will apply immense pressure on Seoul to expand structural export controls against China.
And we are not just talking about holding back a few consumer microchips here.
No.
So what are they actually demanding?
The U.S. wants Korea to block the sale of advanced semiconductor manufacturing equipment, cutting-edge chemical materials, and dual-use technologies to any Chinese entity.
Wow. So basically the U.S. is saying, we will treat you like a top-tier ally, but you have to actively help us kneecap your own biggest trading partner.
Yeah. Starve them of the equipment they need to build their own tech sector. That is the blunt translation of the policy.
That is a massive ask, because for Korean industries that have deep historic exposure to the Chinese market, complying with Washington's demands means taking a massive financial hit.
A huge hit. Which leads us immediately to the second enormous risk in all of this.
Beijing's backlash.
Exactly. China is not blind. They see May 13th. They see the U.S. publicly cementing alliance solidarity right on their doorstep.
I am sure Beijing views that layover in Seoul as incredibly provocative.
They absolutely do. And the risk of economic retaliation is not theoretical. We only have to look back at the Todd episode to see China's playbook in action.
Oh, the THAAD dispute. Let's definitely ground that for the listener because it is the perfect case study. For those who might not know, THAAD is the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense.
Right, it's a U.S. anti-missile system.
Exactly. It was deployed in South Korea a few years ago to defend against North Korean missile threats. But China saw its really powerful radar as a surveillance threat to their own military.
And China's response to that deployment was brutal.
Just economically devastating.
Yeah, they didn't use military force. They weaponized their consumer market. They banned Chinese tour groups from visiting Korea, which instantly devastated the Korean tourism sector.
They went after Korean corporations directly.
Yeah, mercilessly. The Lotte Group, which is a massive Korean conglomerate, they provided the golf course land for the Teddy system to be built on.
Oh, so they were target number one.
Exactly. China suddenly discovered all these quote-unquote fire code violations in Lotte supermarkets all across China, forcing over 80 stores to shut down almost overnight.
That is crazy.
Lotte alone reportedly lost over $1.7 billion and eventually had to pull its retail operations out of China almost entirely.
$1.7 billion over a piece of land for a missile defense system.
Yep. And it wasn't just supermarkets. They even banned Korean K-pop concerts and dramas from Chinese streaming services.
So it was a fully coordinated, multi-billion-dollar market punishment, really just to prove a point.
Exactly.
When you consider that parts of the Korean economy still rely heavily on China-linked demand today, a replay of that kind of retaliation is terrifying.
It is the ultimate nightmare scenario for Seoul.
Right, you take Washington's hand, and Beijing literally sets your supermarkets on fire. The sheer diplomatic fatigue of managing that dynamic has to be exhausting for the South Korean government.
The fatigue is accumulating rapidly. Both great powers are applying relentless pressure on Korea to explicitly choose a side. And navigating these day-to-day crises with temporary band-aids, it just isn't sustainable anymore.
No, you can't survive as the mob bank forever. You either get raided by the cops or blown up by the syndicate.
Exactly. Which is why Korea needs a highly sophisticated, durable strategy to survive being perpetually squeezed in this vice.
Which actually brings us to this fascinating geopolitical rebrand we found while researching this deep dive, the shift from the shrimp to the smart dolphin strategy.
Yes, I love this metaphor. For decades, the dominant metaphor in Korean diplomatic circles described the country as a shrimp getting crushed between whales.
Right. The U.S. and China are the whales thrashing around, and Korea is just the poor, helpless collateral damage.
It's a very fatalistic mindset. It assumes zero agency on Korea's part.
But holding the keys to the global memory chip supply chain means you aren't a shrimp anymore.
Exactly. You have to become a smart dolphin.
I love that. So how does one become a smart dolphin?
Well, a dolphin isn't a whale, obviously, but it is fast, highly intelligent, and it doesn't get crushed by the waves. It surfs them on its own terms.
It carves an independent path.
Exactly. And to execute that dolphin strategy, you really need a foundation of what analysts call principled diplomacy.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning you cannot just react to whoever is threatening the loudest tariffs that week. Korea needs firm, non-negotiable red lines that are anchored deeply in its national security and its semiconductor dominance.
Clarity is what prevents a mid-sized power from being dragged into the whale fight.
Precisely. But principles alone aren't enough. You have to follow it up with highly tailored precision messaging to both Washington and Beijing.
Okay, but let's be real here. Telling Washington, we expect our rightful share of the subsidies because we are an irreplaceable partner, that sounds like a very dangerous game of chicken.
It carries risks, sure.
Aren't they risking the U.S. just accelerating its own domestic chip manufacturing through the GSBS Act to eventually cut Korea out entirely?
You are hitting on the absolute core tension there. Yes, the U.S. is trying to onshore its manufacturing, but building semiconductor ecosystems takes decades.
Right. You can't just build a factory and turn it on tomorrow.
And Washington knows they need Korea right now. So Korea's message to the U.S. is essentially, we are not a passive vassal state. We are a co-architect of this global supply chain.
Okay, I can see how that works with the U.S. But the messaging to China has to require even more agility.
Oh, much more.
How do you possibly tell Beijing, hey, we are hosting the U.S. Treasury Secretary to build a tech wall against you, but we still really want to sell you our smartphones.
It's a very delicate dance.
Yeah.
The signal to Beijing has to be framed purely around non-hostility and mutual economic benefit.
So what does that sound like in practice?
Seoul has to communicate something like, we are complying with U.S. export controls only on the most extreme, cutting-edge military applications because of our security alliance, but we are actively protecting our broader commercial trade with you.
We are not a frontline combatant in the American containment strategy.
Exactly. We are just honoring our security pact.
I hear that, but let's look at the physical practice of this strategy, because words only go so far in geopolitics.
Yeah.
We're actually seeing the smart dolphin strategy manifest in real physical capital flight, aren't we?
We absolutely are.
Because Korea isn't just negotiating, they are actively building an escape hatch.
That is the ultimate aha moment of this entire dynamic. The smart dolphin strategy isn't just diplomatic rhetoric, it is actual supply chain diversification.
Because they know the U.S. China crossfire is only going to get worse.
Exactly. So Korean conglomerates are quietly but very aggressively building completely independent supply chains in third countries.
Where are they going?
They are pouring billions into Vietnam for electronics manufacturing, they are expanding in India for consumer goods, and they are building huge facilities in Poland for EV battery plants and defense manufacturing.
Wow, so they are physically moving their exposure out of the blast radius?
Yes.
If the U.S. and China want to fight, Korea is making sure its economic engine can run on alternative tracks in Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe. That is actual agency.
It is a phenomenal high-wire act. In diplomacy, crisis and opportunity are often two sides of the exact same coin.
That is so true.
By leveraging their tech dominance to secure IRA waivers from the U.S., maintaining these commercial back channels with China to avoid another sad disaster, and simultaneously offshoring their supply chains to neutral countries, Korea is attempting to build a survival formula right in the middle of a struggle between giants.
And if they pull it off, it could launch Korea's global standing to a completely new tier. They truly aren't just a buffer zone anymore. They are the venue where the new rules are being written.
The May 13th meeting in Seoul between Scott Bessent and He Lifeng perfectly encapsulates how advanced technology has completely rewired traditional diplomacy.
Yeah, the pregame match is happening in Seoul because Seoul currently controls the stadium lights.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a really incredible conversation. To wrap this up, we've unpacked how South Korea is shedding that helpless shrimp mentality, wielding its semiconductor oligopoly as a geopolitical weapon, and really playing the smart dolphin to survive this Trump-Xi collision course.
It is going to be fascinating to watch unfold.
But here is something fascinating to ponder on your own as we close out this deep dive today. If advanced manufacturing and supply chain choke points are the new ultimate weapons of geopolitical leverage, which other mid-sized, tech-heavy nations are going to find themselves in this exact